The Khojas, A Journey of Faith. This is Hasnain Walji from the Mullah Askar Islamic Library and Resource Center. This journey of faith begins from a Hindu heritage onto Satpanth, which combines Sufi ideas onto Ismaili, Nizari faith, and ultimately to the Jafri Mazhab. The Khojas come from the Loana caste, which is part of the Hindu social order of the commoners as it is understood within the caste system. And the word Khoja is a phonetic corruption of the Farsi word Khoja given to us by Pir Sraddin. A Khoja label has no connection with Islam. A Khoja is born as a Khoja. It is not a religion or a sect to which one could be inducted. The conversion of the Khojas begins with the arrival of Pir Sraddin in Sindh, and he was responsible for the conversion of the Loanas to this hodgepodge religion called Satpanth. There are a number of myths about his origins, the most common consensus being that he was an emissary, a dai of the Nizari branch of the Ismaili sect. Some say that he was a Sufi teacher who had come from Iran. Whatever the case may be, it was Sraddin who convinced the Lohanas at that time that the Lord Vishnu, which they believed in, the 10th incarnation of Lord Vishnu, was Nauzubillah Hazrat Ali, and therefore he got them to convert from Satpanth, and then over a period of time he converted to the Ismaili and ultimately to the Ithnashri faith in the 19th century. The period between Sardadin to Aga Khan is shrouded in mystery. Suffice it to say that when Fateh Ali Shah dies in 1834, Hassan Ali Shah, who was to be the Aga Khan I, comes to India, and this is where the Khoja community gets more defined within the Indian subcontinent. In 1842, when the Aga Khan I arrives from Iran, he makes certain changes which created some turbulence in the community. There were court cases, there were Sunni Khojas who were killed, there were 3 who were actually injured, and a separate Jamaat was formed, which was the Sunni Jamaat of the Khojas, and this building is evidence of that particular group. The court cases that the Aga Khan had to face was the famous Khoja case in the High Court of Bombay, and there was another suit brought by Haji Bibi, the daughter of Jangi Shah, an uncle of the Aga Khan, where it was tried to prove that they were actually Shia Ithnashris. But it was Mullah Qadir Hussain Karbalai's arrival in Bombay that changed the perception and the direction of the community. It was Devji Jamal who actually brought Mullah Qadir Hussain Karbalai at the request of Ayatollah Zainul Abidin Mazandarani to Bombay, and this is the madrasa which was set up. And this is a portrait of Devji Bhai Jamal who visited Karbala in 1872. The period after that, 1873 onwards, were years of tribulation, and there were a lot of issues with the Aga Khan, where Mullah Qadir Hussain Karbalai now opens a madrasa. There was a pressure to boycott the mullah, and of course many other things that happened, whereby there were pressures put upon the Khoja, like a social boycott, excommunication from the Khoja Jamaat, refusal to bury in the Khoja Qabristan, opposition to building mosques, and so on and so forth. Also, there were prominent Khojas who were assassinated. Lalan Alidin was killed in Karachi. In Mumbai, Killu Khata was hanged. Hirji Alarakia and Larji Sajan were also killed. This is a likeness of Shahid Lal Alidina, who was in fact killed in Karachi, the first Khoja martyr ever to be killed for faith. This is a lonely grave of Killu Khatao, who was hanged in 1878 for having stabbed a Mukhi who taunted him about changing his faith. Laji Sajan and Hirji Bhai Alarakia were the 2 who were actually murdered, and then there were others who were also injured with them. In 1876, Khalfan Ratansi was excommunicated. His daughter was denied burial. In 1877, Devji Jamal was excommunicated, and it was at that time that he decided to migrate to East Africa. It was another defining moment that the Ghulam Ali Haji Ismail, popularly known as Haji Naji, comes to the scene where he began to do tabligh amongst the Khojas, and the Rah-e-Najat paper that he established continues to remain to be published. On the other side of the Indian Ocean, it was Mullah Muhammad Jafar Sharif Devji, the grandson of Devji Jamal, who was born in 1889 in Zanzibar, who continued to travel throughout East Africa to do the tabligh. And now came the time for the Khojas to establish the very first mosque, which was in Zanzibar in 1881. And this is the Quwat Jamaat Mosque that we see, which was established in 1881, which is the very first mosque, and the Hujjat Mosque was established in 1884. This is a picture of Sayyid Abdul Hussain Marashi, who was the first resident alim sent to Zanzibar by Ayatollah Zainul Abidin Mazandarani. Bagamoyo and Lamu were again those cities which boasted amongst the very first mosques in the East African coast. And talking about mosques, Madagascar had 1865 in Nosy Bay when the first mosque was established. The second mosque was built in Marwa in 1896, and the third one in Majunga later on. In 1901, the establishment of the Mumbai Jamaat was published in the local newspapers as a public announcement. What we see here are the portraits of the two resident alims, Abdul Qasim Najafi, the very first one, followed by Muhammad Hassan Najafi, the subsequent resident alim of our Jamaat in Mumbai. In 1876, land was bought by the Jamaat in Karachi, where a masjid was built on the present site in 1910 in the area of Kharadar. The Pirai Jamaat, as it is known, was established at around the same time, and this is a picture of the famous Pir in Karachi, from where the Karachi Jamaat gets its name. This is where the taziyas are kept. The Bara Imam Bara is what you see here, which is again a famous Imam Bara, where the Sham-e Gariba Majlis by Allama Rashid Turabi were relayed by Pakistan radio and later on TV all over the world. An illustrious son of the Khoja community is none other than Muhammad Ali Jinnah that we see here in typical Khoja dress, which is called the community wears. And this is a historic picture which testifies that Muhammad Ali Jinnah was a Khoja Shia influencer. The Jamaat fever spreads around the Khoja world. Now with the success elsewhere, a new Jamaat was being formed, and subsequently there was a dispersal of the Khoja Shia influencer community towards East Africa, Burma, and Aden after the Second World War. With the independence of the Indo-Pak subcontinent, people also moved over to Karachi. Upon their arrival in Africa, the Khojas went through diverse colonial influences, and it is a matter of surprise that they were able to continue with their faith and culture despite those diverse influences. With the 1972 mass expulsion from Uganda and the upheavals movements in East Africa, many were forced to look at the Western world to make their home. Another exodus that took place in 1990, where an entire community of Somalia was evacuated in a daring seaborne evacuation led by Alhaj Sajjad Rashid, and this was the dispersal of the community. The genesis of us getting better organized was in fact first called for by Abdul Hussain Sachedina, the editor of the magazine called Monadi, and this was the genesis of the federation, where he asked for to bring better order and discipline in our Jamaats by forming a federation. Indeed, forming a federation is a unique trait of the Khojas, as quoted by Alhaj Hassan Jafar in his soon-to-be-published book Endangered Species, where he says if there is one Khoja, you have a lonely individual. If you have two, they form a Jamaat, and if there are three, they will form a federation. In 1945, the Africa Federation was conceptualized. In 1946, a constitutional conference was called to form the Africa Federation. Marhumullah Askar, in the outline history of the Khoja Shia National community, quotes to say that it allowed the Khoja to grow as a more vibrant community. Indeed, it was with that very spirit that the World Federation was born, with unanimous assent at the 1976 Constitutional Conference to continue to serve community and humanity. The founders of the World Federation had a very clear vision: to serve the religious and the social needs of the community with simplicity and sincerity. And it is that ethos that pervades the various organizations like the Gujarat Federation, Nasimco, Council of European Jamaats, and of late the Pakistan Federation. Numbering less than 125,000, the perceived influence of the Khojas belies their number, and that is why we need to tell our story to the rest of the world as to how the Khojas have operated. To give some perspective of the numbers of the 210 million Shias, there are only 120,000 Khoja Shia ethnacities. In March 2000, the community faced a critical time when, acknowledged as the most charismatic leaders of the Shia world, Marhum Mullah Asghar Ali M.M. Jafar breathed his last at the offices of the World Federation. The question arises, where do we go from here? It is this kind of evaluation that will enable us to deal with contemporary challenges and plan for the future. And this is left over to the next generation. I would like to state that we need to meet those challenges of the day not with an unquestioning observance to convention, but with a spirit of conceptualizing new visions and new horizons in keeping with our culture and indeed, most importantly, our faith.